What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another week of NFL picks. Week 7. We are officially in the heart of October, a third of the way through the season, and I think everyone can agree. This year, it feels like pretty much so far, there's a lot of teams you can make the argument for. Some have stood out above the rest, but it overall feels like this year, maybe even more so than past years, the league is a whole lot closer to each other than they have been. So I think that's what is the beauty about this season. It feels like anything can happen. So getting into um, how I've done so far through these first 6 weeks. Last week I went 9-6, which it is all right. It was a nice bounce back. Still feel like I could definitely do better. Overall season record 59 to 33 and 1. So starting off with the teams we have on a bye week. We got two teams on a bye week, and it's the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. And both these teams definitely needing a reset. Buffalo coming off of two straight losses, both to second year quarterbacks. And they really need to get things back on track. In Baltimore, they really need to get some of their guys back and hope to go on a big run if they want any hope for their season. I think Baltimore's start has been so bad. There's just sometimes you don't even believe it. I don't think you can even believe how bad Baltimore's start has been record wise. But that's just how it's been. That's how rough it's been so far for them. But getting into the Week 7 action, starting off with Thursday Night Football, and just talking about the Ravens. Two teams in the Ravens division. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are leading the AFC North, really through the first couple weeks, look to be running away with that division, which I don't think, really anyone would have thought. Going to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Now, I'll say this feels like a real Joe Flacco spot. It's a short week. Pittsburgh, they've been impressive. They've won. I don't think anyone would say that Pittsburgh, would be in the same regards as maybe someone would put a Tampa in. And that's where I really do say, though, I don't think the league is that far from each other. And in these division games, as I think a lot of people know, anything can happen in them. Joe Flacco, it really feels like, he's playing with the best weapons he's ever played with. And after starting 2-0, Cincinnati losing four straight, they're in need of a win. It just feels like one of those weird short weeks that, it's a close game late and the Bengals, they find a way to win. In a Joe Flacco spot, he comes out, leads them to a victory, gets in their third win of the year to go 3-4. Pittsburgh 4-2. Probably not that high scoring, I would say. So, give me a close one, 21-19. Next, and this is shaping up to be a really good game across the pond. The LA Rams and the Jacksonville Jaguars in London. Jacksonville making their annual stop to London. And, Jaguars team that is coming off of a letdown, it really feels like, versus Seattle. But, we saw Jacksonville get their signature win versus the Chiefs. We have seen this team come out and we see the potential with them. Liam Cohen has done a pretty good job so far with this Jacksonville team, and Trevor Lawrence has been playing some good ball. The Rams, however, they are really getting back on track, getting the win in Baltimore, and they're really looking to build some momentum as we start to really head into some of the mid to later weeks of this season. And when I say there's, I think some games that could go either way, and I think this is one of them. And I think this is going to really be a game that comes down to what offense is able to be more effective in those critical positions. And, actually, I really feel like it's a Jacksonville spot. I think Jacksonville wins. I think it's a close one. I could see Jacksonville maybe winning off a game winning field goal. But I just think, their familiarity with London definitely helps out also. So give me the Jaguars 26-23. Next, the Eagles Vikings. Minnesota coming off of a bye. Philly, they have lost two straight. They are in desperate need of a bounce back, especially when you look at that Eagles schedule coming up. It's going to get rough. So they need to bounce back here. Now, this was another tough one to pick. Minnesota's a very tough place to play. Philly's offense has pretty much been anemic all season so far. They've not been able to get their wide receivers involved. And, I'll say, if you're going to beat, this Minnesota team, you're going to have to take some deep shots. You're going to have to get those wide receivers involved. But I do think that we could potentially see Philadelphia rely heavily on Saquon Barkley. As far as the Vikings quarterback situation, I also feel like there's some uncertainty there. So this could be a game that maybe Philadelphia is able to rely heavy on their defense to go out and get that victory. Maybe almost similarly to that Chiefs game that they played early this year. So I'm going to take the Eagles to win. It feels like they have to bounce back. I think it's a close one. So give me Philly 20-17. Next, the New England Patriots and the Tennessee Titans. And, it's just been a tale of two seasons for both of these teams. The Patriots with Mike Vrabel, the former Titans coach, they are leading the AFC East through 6 weeks of this season. And Drake May has been an exceptional quarterback. That absolutely looks to be heading in the right direction in New England. Meanwhile, for the Tennessee Titans, they just fired Brian Callahan. I'm not sure who's going to be the interim head coach. I don't know if they made that announcement. Apologize to me for not knowing that. But I do think with these interims, you do typically tend to see teams, play tougher. But still, I think New England, and this is a big revenge spot for Mike Vrabel. I think they're going to come out. I think they're going to win. I could see it being a little closer, so give me New England 28-23, but I think it's another solid day for Drake May. He comes out. They get that offense going early. New England wins. Next, the Carolina Panthers, who, look, give them their credit. Give them, their due respect. They are 500 for the first time in 4 years. Rico Dowdle has ran them to two straight wins. It feels like Bryce Young is really playing his best football when, you know, it is not all on him. And you are able to get that running game going. You can rely on your defense to make some plays. That's when Bryce Young is playing his best football. Um, Against the Jets team that really has been disappointing so far. But this is another one of those games. I feel like we are in store for a pretty weird week around the league, and it feels like just one of those low-scoring, ugly games. I feel like Carolina will go as far as Rico Dowdle can carry them at this point. So if Rico Dowdle can have another great game like he had versus Miami and versus Dallas, then yes, Carolina should win this game. But it's especially for someone like Rico Dowdle, it's going to be especially hard, I think, for that. And also, the Jets are due for a win. It's so hard to go undefeated, and it's so hard to go winless in this league. It feels like a very ugly game, in the Meadowlands where Carolina, that you do have to prove that, because once again, this is, your first time being 500, being, this much into an actual serious, potential contender conversation that, do you really know how to handle that pressure? And if you do, you give credit to the Panthers. But I'm going to pick the Jets here. I think it's ugly, low scoring, 15-13. I think the Jets get their first win of the year. Next, and this is a matchup between two 1-5 teams, the Dolphins and the Browns. Certainly not the most exciting matchup, but I will say I would not be shocked if this game, whoever loses this game ends up firing their coach right afterwards, whether it's Mike McDaniel or it's Stefanski. And I do think, as far as the Dolphins go, the comments made by Tua were pretty concerning, but I still think they have a lot more talent than the Browns, and they should be able to go in there and get a win and go to 2-5 and maybe secure McDaniel a little bit of a longer leash. Cleveland goes to 1-6, and I don't know how much you can blame Stefanski for it, but still, it only goes so long before your coach does take blame. So give me the Dolphins here. I think I think they could win pretty convincingly, 33-14. Next, the New Orleans Saints and the Chicago Bears. Chicago, I mean, they are really heading in the right direction. 3-2, three straight wins, and for the Saints, they've lost a lot of games, but they've been competitive in these games. So I feel like that's a little bit of reason to still be excited for them. However, going into Chicago, and Chicago's really getting, off on the right track. They are, after losing two straight to open the year, they are really, getting this thing back under control. And, it's definitely going to help, I think, them, in the long run and potentially being in a playoff race. So, this is a game you got to win for Chicago. I think they do. 27-17, I think they get it done. Next, the Chiefs at home in Arrowhead to take on the Raiders, and it finally feels like the Chiefs' offense is back. This feels like the offense that we were more accustomed to earlier in Mahomes' career. The explosiveness is back in the offense. It feels like one play could flip everything, and Kansas City's now capable of making that play. Mahomes is. It feels like he's more electric now. It feels like he has the electric nature he had earlier in his career this year. Obviously with the playmaking ability of guys like Worthy and getting Rasheed Rice back. And the Raiders, I don't think the Raiders are going to stand much of a chance here. So give me the Chiefs. I'm going to say big. I'm going to say 41-17. I think the Chiefs win. Heading into the late game, and this is going to be a good one. The Indianapolis Colts and the LA Chargers, two teams leading their divisions here in, still this early part of the season. But the Colts have definitely, I think, been one of the stories of the NFL this season with Daniel Jones, with how shocking, obviously, they have been, how great they have been. They continue to win these games. The Chargers, they sit atop the AFC West at this point in time. Um, and it really feels like, it could go either way. But I think, once again, Justin Herbert, he has definitely, I think, had his moments this year. It feels like Indy is due to start coming back down to reality some. You're not going to win all the games. And I feel like that's kind of the spot here. I feel like it's going to be close, but in the end, we're going to see the Chargers pull this out at home, 30-26. So I could see it being high scoring, but the Chargers get the win. Next, the New York Giants and the Denver Broncos. Now, the Giants with Jackson Dart have really been a sneaky team. It feels like, they've gotten some upset wins they shouldn't, so I feel like you kind of have to be on high alert for this game. The Broncos, they are 4-2. They are right there atop that AFC West. They are looking to stay pace. And I really feel like Denver being at home, that gives them the edge. And the obviously a young quarterback having to go into that environment in Mile High is always tough. So I think it could be close, but give me the Broncos 23-16. Next, the Green Bay Packers and the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona, after starting 2-0, has had a absolutely rough, past few weeks, obviously, with how some of these games have gone at the end. And, as far as Green Bay goes, I feel like they are a much better team. They're a more put together team. I feel like Green Bay could go in here and could definitely win, even though the Cardinals have had a lot of close games, and I guess it wouldn't be out of character for them to have another one, but I do think Green Bay wins. I'll say 34-13. I can see it being another big day for Josh Jacobs, but give me the Packers to win. Next, an NFC East matchup. The Washington Commanders and the Cowboys. And I think for Washington, you really have to be questioning, are they having that, letdown that everybody talks about? What we see with second year quarterbacks who maybe overachieved their first year. And then as far as the Cowboys go, I mean, they've really been just I don't know what you make of Dallas. I truly don't. I mean, they have two wins versus both the New York teams, and, they've lost to everyone else, or they haven't won versus anyone else. And I feel like, for Washington, this is just it's one of those sneaky spots for Dallas where, it feels like every year they do get some wins they shouldn't. It feels like one of those spots. Dallas comes out a late window. They're accustomed to this. They come out, they get the win. So I'm going to go Cowboys 27-19. They pull off the upset. Next, Sunday night football in Santa Clara, the site of the Super Bowl in February. The Atlanta Falcons coming off a very big win versus the Buffalo Bills. Going out to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. Bijan versus CMC. It's going to be a great game to watch. Um, and I really think, it's going to come down to what team is able to get their superstar going more. And, at the end of the day, Bijan has been one of the hottest players in the league to start this season, and I think you got to go with him. So I think in a low scoring game, I think the Falcons are going to get another win and go to 4-2 on the year. So I'm going to go low scoring, say 19-13. It could be an old school game, relying on the running backs. But I think Bijan's going to outshine CMC. The Falcons are going to get the win. And finally, Monday night, we do have two Monday night games once again. The first one, and this, I think, will tell us a lot about the state of the NFC. This is probably the game of the week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Detroit Lions in Ford Field. Tampa Bay has maybe been the best team in the NFL through the first 6 weeks. Baker Mayfield, you'd probably say is the front runner for MVP. If it were to end today, he'd probably get the award. Detroit, though, they've been right there for the most part. And they definitely have been competitive. And like I will definitely say that I feel like for these two teams, this could be a lot of the uncertainty that I think we feel with really where the this NFL season is so far. I feel like, especially in the on the NFC side of things, it could definitely clear some things up come Monday night with this matchup. And the Lion, and I'll say this, I feel like Tampa Bay, it feels like they could win any game. It feels like they have the tools to win any game, and we've seen that. But I feel like for the Lions, them at home, I feel like you got to give them the edge there. Obviously they're able to get their offense going much more. It feels like Tampa, is due to get a loss, at some point, at least one. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna give the Lions the win. I think 38-26. I could, feel really good about the score. I could see Detroit coming out, having a good day on offense, and that, is what leads them to victory. And then the final game of the week, 10 p.m. start time for the East Coast people. The Texans and the Seahawks. I guarantee you not a lot of people will be up for this one. But, it's an interesting matchup. I think for Seattle, they have had a very solid start. You want to keep the momentum going. Houston, it feels like in that division, this may be a must win game to try to keep pace with the Colts and with the Jaguars. And it feels like once again these types of games, they're very weird spots. They're kind of tough to predict. Houston is coming off a bye week. Um, so, it feels like in a very. And Seattle does have trouble winning at home. So it feels like maybe a low scoring defensive battle that I think the Texans could win. I think the Texans, I'm going to go with Texans 19-14. So, anyways, with that being said, appreciate you all for watching. Remember to like, remember to subscribe, remember to share out. I will see you all in the next one and take care.